It's Momo Monday, and I think this Momo Monday we need deep breaths, so you know what to do. Breathe in and out. And breathe in. And out. And I decided to bring back Momo Monday this week because there's been two things in rapid succession again that have pitted people on the internet against each other, and they're fighting like cats and dogs, and there's a lot of people who mean very well, but they think you can fight fire with fire and hate with hate, and I emphatically disagree with that. At some point, somebody has to be an adult and realize that fighting is a choice. And sometimes you do have to fight. You have to stand up for what you believe in. Other times, it's required for adults to go, I'm not going to fight about this. I want to talk about this. And I have said this about subjects over and over and over again. I'm not interested in debate. I want to have a discussion. Debate used to mean you go back and forth on the pros and cons of a situation and learn something from each other over a spirited battle of ideas. What debate has become is people talking past each other to score points with their various factions, so the various factions can go online after the fact and talk about how their side destroyed the other side. And it doesn't do the beneficial elements of a debate, which is get both sides the best possible hearing that side can present so everybody learns something. People seem terrified to learn from each other these days. And of course, that was a component in the leaked Google memo and the subsequent firing of James Damore. But it was also a major dynamic in what went down in Charlottesville, Virginia, this past weekend. And I'm not going to get too much into what happened because people have very strong opinions about who was right and who was wrong, and whether there's some moral equivalency in the violence committed by white supremacists and the violence committed by the people opposing the white supremacists. I don't want to get into that because I haven't been able to find enough information online that seems trustworthy and hasn't been, pardon the pun, whitewashed for political reasons. I want to talk about why this stuff happens. And I've been a believer for a long time that hate covers up dire fears. People hate because it feels safer than examining the underlying fear that is driving that hate. Why do you hate someone? Well, hate's a very strong emotion, so you hate someone because you feel threatened by them in some way. It's not the same as disapproving or disliking someone's behavior, but still seeing them as a human being. Hate, as I understand it, is something that allows you to see another person as less than human. The U.S. prizes a quite radical form of freedom of expression. In other parts of the world, there are far more strict limitations on freedom of expression. Europe has, parts of Europe anyway, have rather strict anti-hate speech laws. Canada is somewhere in the middle. We're in this period of time where negative connotations have been put on words because various things are being judged by the worst actors within those groups. And you can be vehemently opposed to what white supremacists do and believe. I am. It scares me in this day and age that stuff still exists, but unfortunately, petty hatred is a big part of many people's nature. I think it's a learned thing. I think it is generational, and it really bothers me. But you can say that and also say that the violence was very likely a minority of the participants, because otherwise the police wouldn't be able to keep order. It would have been a straight up riot that became uncontrollable very quickly. But also that what led to the one death that wasn't a result of the helicopter crash that took the lives of 2 law enforcement officers, but the actions of the man that drove that car, at least the suspect, are the actions of one person. And it does matter that one person decided to become extremely violent. You know, I think a big part of the problem right now is that personal accountability is really being lost in these faction versus faction RVR battles that are waging not just on the internet, but in the real world as well. And I think that the internet is given too much credence, given too much responsibility for what people do in the real world. People who fight on the internet fight the way they do because they know it's on the internet. Nobody can reach across the internet and stab someone. The question is, what happens to people who are on the edge when they get taken up in the... I don't know how to say this without sounding new agey, but taken up in the energy of these protests that are coming from a place of intense hate. And it's not just one side versus the other, it's both sides. If you compare, and by both sides, I don't mean both sides of an issue. I mean both sides of the people who are there looking for a fight. We're not looking to replace one set of overlords with another. We want actual equality. A person is a person, and that means the same thing no matter who it is. And it is really scary when I see news cameras putting David Duke on the airwaves saying that they're here to take their country back. My God, like, first of all, why are you putting that guy on the news? Why are you allowing him to transmit these statements? This isn't the Jerry Springer show. This is NBC News, you know? Like, the problem is people see that, they see he has status, they see the news cameras in front of him. Someone who feels helpless could take that and see a lifeline. Like, okay, it's not me, it's we are being oppressed. And this gets really difficult because right now it seems if you spend any sort of time on the internet, that unless you're oppressed, you don't matter. Unless you're oppressed, you're not a human being. So people are trying to find ways to be oppressed so they can be a human being. It is so backward. And it's, I think, and I could be completely wrong about this, but I think it's because everything is coming at people through a lens of hate, that you have to be fighting against something to matter as opposed to fighting for something. And this came into very sharp focus on Feedback Friday, which got a little difficult at times. And it got difficult because there's some people in the chat who were pretty keyed up, and they weren't letting me finish before they were firing more things at me. And I had to get short with them and say, if we're going to talk about this, you have to let me finish. Stop jumping all over me. And what happened was we ended up actually having a conversation. And I was able to clarify for them the nuance of what I was saying. Now, that went against everything about call outs and calling something for what it is. It was, look, I'm not going to ban you from this chat. I did ban 2 or 3 people who were just saying outright, like one person came in claiming to be God and saying, sorry about your hair. I mean, it was straight up gingerphobia. I cut that guy. There was another guy who was trying to provoke. There are some transgender people who do participate in my live programs, and there was someone there who kept saying there are only 2 genders. I got rid of that guy. They weren't there to have a discussion. But these other people were. And one guy had a Peppy the Frog icon and a screen name of Shlomo Sheckelstein. And this person, I'm assuming it's a he, asked a question. And because this guy had not caused trouble in the chat and he'd had an opportunity, he didn't. He asked a question. And I started answering his question and people are like, he's trolling. And I said, I don't care if he's trolling. The question on its face was legitimate. I'm going to answer it because if he's asking it, there's a likelihood that other people are saying the exact same thing and they just don't want to say something for fear that they'll get labeled a troll. And a few people said, yeah, I'm actually interested in this. So I answered the question. And I answered the other people's question. And at the end, the 2 people who came at me the hardest, who were coming across from the beginning as not seeming at all interested in actually having a discussion. They were attacking. They just seemed like they wanted to tear me down. I talked to them. It was hard. I was left exhausted. But at the end, they said, thank you for talking to me. And we got some progress there, a small amount. They're not going to absorb everything I was trying to say, and I'm not saying I'm 100% right about everything. But the small amount that they were able to listen to and absorb, because I took the hits and didn't just immediately kick them the minute I didn't like what they were doing. I said, look, are you going to listen to me or is this a waste of time? There is a benefit to doing that. And it's not short term. It doesn't feel good. It feels the exact opposite of good. It's exhausting. But at least when you do that, there is a hope of an exchange of ideas. There is a hope that somebody learns something. These protests, nobody learns anything because these are groups of people. You cannot go, well, the other side has a point. That's not what protesters do. It seems wrong that someone lost their life because of a statue. And it isn't because of the statue. It's about what that statue means to various people with various family backgrounds and the various stories that people have been told about their peoples and what that means to their place in the world. And you can, in order to be effective, you have to sympathize with the deep emotional meaning that that has for people, even if you don't agree with it. Because if you don't give another person that, if you don't give another person a validation of their basic humanity, they're not going to listen to you. And I think the big mistake that social justice movements are making is that they break people in the process of inducting them into a movement. And what does that do to a person over time? What does that do to someone over weeks and months and years to feel like they're harboring thought crimes? Those ideas need to come out and they need to be discussed so we can actually get at the underlying fear driving these angry and unfortunately sometimes violent behaviors. If we don't do that, we're never going to get to the bottom of this issue, which is just that. People are scared. Some of it, I believe, is economic. When people feel comfortable, when people feel generally good about the way things are going, they don't go out in the street and fight. It's when times get tough and people feel like the only thing they really have that bad government decisions can't take from them is their morals. That's when you start getting these violent clashes in the streets. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to keep in mind that the reason people are fighting is because people's wages are stagnating. This generation is the first one in a really long time to not do as well as their parents are, at least projected to not do as well as their parents. That does something to a people. And we have to consider that as well as many other variables when looking at this stuff. Unfortunately, people want to make things simple so they don't have to stare into the abyss. And the thing about staring into the abyss is when you start looking at these things, when you start studying hate, you learn some things about yourself. You learn some difficult truths. Everybody has a group that they feel uncomfortable around. And if you can accept that you are uncomfortable around groups or individual people, you can find a way to not hate them. I know there are certain people that when I'm around them, I hate them because they make me feel very threatened. If I'm not around them, I can have a more logical, prosaic, understanding view of things, because if they're not in my orbit, they can't do bad things to me. Like I said, it's a temporary protection, but it takes something out of you. It's like there's a meter that starts dropping. You know, like swimming mechanics in video games where you can only stay underwater for so long? You can only stay hating for so long. And that hate equally consumes white supremacists and neo-Nazis and these other types that are online constantly. I mean, I saw somebody connect red pillars, Gamergate, and neo-Nazis on Twitter. Like those are the same things at all. Red pillars and Gamergaters, at worst, you can say are annoying. Neo-Nazis are by definition violent. They go out and hurt people. You can't stop hate with hate. You can't fight fear with fear. You have to combat fear with bravery and hate with love. The whole idea of fighting fire with fire, you just end up with more fire. And if your goal is to burn it all down, have at it. But if you're somebody like me who actually wants to build stuff, I want to channel that fire. I don't want to stamp out the passion that drives most of these relatively young people to get involved in the various causes they believe in. I want to channel that and put it in a place where it could, fire can be used to create steam to drive a boiler, which generates electricity. Fire can be placed in a fireplace and used to generate warmth. I want to take that passion that people have and make it useful and beneficial and building instead of something that just destroys. And that's about keeping things in perspective, putting them in a productive place, and managing them so the fire doesn't go out, but it also doesn't get out of control. And that's the message I want to leave here. Momo likes warm things too, so he's great with fire in the right place. He likes sleeping by the fire in the winter. And so that's the message. And hopefully this gives people a bit of a different perspective on what happened. It's awful. It's tragic. I'm having a really hard time thinking about what happened in Charlottesville. And If there are parts of this that didn't make sense, that's why. I'm still processing. People are likely going to call me an apologist, and that's fine. That's not what I'm doing. I just am learning from my relatives, the people that came before me, who lived through periods where hate was used to horribly dehumanize people. And the lessons they brought away from it are that they try not to hate anybody because they've seen how destructive it is. So I'll leave it there. We'll finish off with breathing. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. Okay, hang in there, everyone.